Back then, I spent my time doubting my husband, not knowing what to expect. This was almost a decade ago. In my 30s, I was enjoying my newlywed life with my husband. I had always imagined that given his demanding job our lifestyles would be different, but he would stay out so late that it felt as if I was living alone. At first, I would appreciate the few moments my husband would relax at home, but eventually my frustrations grew, and I started lashing out every time I saw him. My husband would try to soothe me, looking concerned. But once he realized nothing could appease me, he stopped even responding. No matter how busy he was, he chose to marry me and should pay more attention to me. That feeling overpowered everything, and I couldn't look at my husband without my feeling blood boil. Every time I picked a fight, my husband would almost always say, "Work will calm down soon, and then we can go to that island you love." But that never happened. "You value your job more than me, don't you? Then don't bother coming home. I'm exhausted, too. Seeing your tired face brings me down." I continued to hurl these harsh words at him. No matter how cruel I was, seeing my husband's indifferent attitude made me feel our marriage was coming to an end. I became more distant to him, and maybe he felt it too because he began staying out even more, saying it was for work. He was always traveling for work, so I didn't doubt him at first. But one day, I found a receipt and a membership card from a business hotel near our local station in my husband's suit pocket. The receipt showed that he'd stayed at the hotel on nights he claimed to be on business trips. The membership card had too many points for just a single stay. He had always been popular with women at work due to his successful career. I thought maybe he found someone else. If he's having fun with her, why should I be the only one suffering? I started going out at night, filling my weekends with plans. At first, it was all fun and games, but I soon grew tired. Days of feigned joy and forced laughter made me sick of myself. Maybe it's time for both of us to move on. Neither of us was really facing the truth about our marriage, just running from it. If my husband could be happier with someone else, then so be it. I also felt that I was reaching a phase where I should move on to a new stage. But he was someone I once thought I'd spend my whole life with. It took a lot of courage for me to even consider divorce. Plus, part of me wondered if ending things was truly the only way. But it seems he has a new girlfriend now. After many days of pondering, I sent a text to my husband's phone. "Will you be done with work early today? We need to talk." Almost immediately, I got a reply. "I have something to tell you too. I'll try to come home as early as I can." Though I thought I was set on divorce, I realized I had assumed my husband didn't want it. Realizing he might also be thinking of divorce crushed me. It became hard to breathe, let alone stand. But his heart had already moved on to someone else. I decided to stop crying. I wanted to end on a light note, at least with a smile. I made up my mind and waited for my husband to come home. Around 9 p.m., he returned. Seeing him after a long time, he had lost a significant amount of weight. His gentle eyes and voice remained the same, but there was a distance between us that seemed insurmountable. He was always a man of few words, and while I spoke, he often looked down, remaining silent except for the occasional nod. I had always wanted to end things with my husband on a note of respect, but I couldn't help feeling belittled. Even though we had been married for a short while and were considering parting ways, why wouldn't he share his feelings? I started to get angry and became confrontational. Yet he just listened silently to my words. Wanting to get him to speak, I mentioned the new woman in his life. I bet he thought I hadn't noticed. Maybe if he knew I was aware, he would scramble to make an excuse. Hearing my words, he looked at me with surprise and let out a brief smile. After a moment he said, "So you knew all along." Strangely enough, his jesting tone made me laugh, and he too burst into laughter. It was the first time in a long while that we laughed together. Despite the situation, I was happy we could share a laugh again, like in the old times. After that, it was strange, but we were able to converse just like before. Maybe he was relieved that I knew about the affair. He seemed so much more at ease. "Let's stop blaming each other. I don't want to end things on a sour note." He agreed with my suggestion, and so we began to sort and pack up our shared belongings. Many of these items held cherished memories, but for now, I wanted to store them out of sight. He was the type to hold on to beloved items for years, but today, he discarded them without hesitation. His decisiveness was so overwhelming that I was left in awe. By midnight, we had tidied up the room, leaving only our individual belongings. Facing me, he said, "Take anything you want. All of this is my fault. Consider it my way of making amends." It looked like he was holding back tears. Did packing up our belongings make him feel lonely? I felt the same, so I understood how he felt. We still have some time to think. Let's sort things out bit by bit. Having finished the majority of the packing, we decided to call it a night. As I soaked in the bathtub, I tried to organize my farts. Although we were still legally married, it was clear our relationship was over. I could probably get alimony from him, but I didn't want to tarnish our memories further. As I was getting ready for bed, my husband, who just had his bath, entered the room. He slid into bed and gently embraced me. "Hey, this feels weird, and it's not fair to your girlfriend." I stiffened a bit, and he said, struggling to find his words, "Just one last time, I want you by my side." I felt his body trembling slightly as he held me. "Are you crying?" He didn't reply. As I caressed his back, I realized he felt lighter and more bony. "Hey, are you okay? You seem to have lost weight." Hearing my words, his trembling stopped. He took a deep breath and said, "I've been trying to slim down lately." "Is that so? Anything else? Are you really okay?" It had been a long time since I last touched him, and I was shocked at how different he felt. He used to have a muscular build. He loved working out and never skipped his training sessions, even when he was busy. "It's a thing of hers," he added. "Though, I see. It's her thing," I thought, feeling a pang of loneliness. If he's that into her that he's willing to change his appearance, he might as well forget about me quickly. Well, if that's the case, there's no need for tears on our last day together. Oh, wait, are those tears of joy? To hold back my sadness, I let out a sarcastic remark that I shouldn't have said. My husband chuckled and said, "Always the same, Elena. I love that about you. Live a happy life from tomorrow on. I'll always be praying for that, no matter where I am." With that, he started snoring softly. He's such a laid-back person till the very end. I whispered to his sleeping face, "I'm praying too," and soon fell asleep myself. Maybe because we were packing up until late last night, I overslept the next day. When I woke up, my husband was no longer in bed. Going to the living room, there was a letter-sized envelope on the table. Inside, there was a checkbook and a bunch of documents. Taking everything out, I saw that they were documents about our combined assets. Moreover, there was a surprisingly large amount in the checkbook under my name. Then, from a smaller envelope, there were the divorce papers. My husband's section was already filled out, and it seems I just needed to fill out my part and submit it. I hurriedly called my husband's cell, but it was already disconnected. For several days, I asked his family and friends about his whereabouts, but no one would tell me anything. I even reached out to his office, only to find out that my workaholic husband had quit several months ago. If he had found another woman and left, I might have understood, but why go to such lengths? Why wouldn't anyone tell me? I began to lose faith in people, but it seemed there was no way to contact him anymore. With the mental fatigue built up even before the divorce, I felt crushed. Given the alimony he had set aside for me, I was now free. I decided to spend some time in a place I loved. After nearly a day of traveling, I reached a remote island. Only about 3,000 inhabitants lived there, and the population was decreasing. I had visited the island with my husband for sightseeing, and I was enchanted by its great nature and the slow passage of time. It was also a place we had promised to visit again once his work settled down. While there were memories with my husband there, what I might need now is the quietness of that place. And a few months later, I decided to rent out the house where we had lived during our marriage, and I moved to the island after quitting my job. Even for me, I think I made a bold decision. But I couldn't imagine living in our home anymore. I don't know how my husband managed to pay off the mortgage, but I appreciate the great effort he made. However, there were too many memories to continue living there alone. Yet, I didn't want his efforts to go to waste, so I decided not to sell the house. There were many questions, but I couldn't ask my husband anymore. I thought I'd spend my time on this peaceful island, letting the days roll by. I started to get used to the island life, becoming familiar with the neighbors. Though I had enough assets to live without working, doing nothing made me feel more depressed. So, I started helping the elderly in the community with their needs. At first, I was treated as an outsider, but as I got accustomed to the work, I was accepted in as a part of the community. As I began to find my place, I heard from a colleague that a new client from outside the island was coming for health reasons. Apparently, there was no cure for his condition, and he had chosen this island as his final residence. It would take some guts for someone in that condition to move to this island as it has no major medical facilities. I thought it would be tough work if I got assigned to that client, but I was the only one available at that time, so I was tasked to visit him. Considering his health condition, I was a bit nervous as I approached his home. I arrived at a small house on a hill overlooking the sea. It had been empty for a while, but I heard that it had been refurbished minimally to make it habitable. It looked like it would barely stand up against strong winds or rain. Is this really where he wants to spend his last days? With concern, I rang the doorbell. A faint voice said, "Come in." After the usual greetings, I entered and saw the client sitting by a window where sunlight and a light breeze entered. With the sun behind him, I couldn't see his face clearly. I squinted my eyes as I approached him. "Nice to meet you, I'll be assisting from today," I said, and as I got closer, I was at a loss for words. Sitting there was my husband, or rather, my ex-husband. We found ourselves mutually surprised, just silently staring at each other. The first to break the silence was my husband. That expression says it all, doesn't it? My husband, mischievously smiling, was the same as before. "What are you doing here?" Surprised at my husband's unexpected appearance, and with the information I had received at work before coming here all mixed in my head, I couldn't speak coherently. My husband pulled my hand, which was frozen in place, and made me sit next to him. He held my hand until I calmed down. Gradually, I did calm down, but I couldn't bring myself to ask about my husband's condition, and he kept apologizing while holding me gently. Unable to find words for my husband, we just sat there, when a voice announcing a visitor came from the entrance. I wiped my tears and headed to the entrance, where a middle-aged man was standing. Seeing my tear-streaked face, he looked slightly surprised but entered with a nod, sitting next to my husband. "How are you doing today?" he asked in a gentle tone. My husband replied something to the effect that nothing was particularly different, and they soon started chatting. This middle-aged man was probably the only doctor on this island. I recalled colleagues mentioning that there were no hospitals here, just a clinic with a nurse and a doctor, who were the lifeline of this island. It seemed that my husband had come prepared to spend his last days on this island. Even with my husband's decision, I wondered if there was something that could be done, and listened attentively to their conversation. However, after about 10 minutes of small talk, the doctor left. Restless, I ran after the doctor. Seeing my flustered state seemed to surprise him again, but after I explained that we were once married, he seemed to understand. Regarding my intrusive questions about my husband's condition and future treatment, the doctor refused to answer. I can't talk about it without his consent. He didn't give me any details. However, seeing my disappointment, he seemed to pity me and said he can't walk for long by himself. I also think it would be best for him not to be alone in the end, so please stay by his side. That made me snap to attention. What happened to my husband's girlfriend? After parting with the doctor, I returned to where my husband was waiting, my steps heavy. My husband seemed to have anticipated me questioning the doctor, and greeted me with a smile, saying, "Finally back." I couldn't just treat this as work, and couldn't leave my husband and go back, so I asked him to let me stay for the night. There were only minimal belongings in my husband's house, and just one set of bedding. It was the first time we had shared a bed since the day we discussed divorce. We cuddled up in the bedding, and shared the stories of how we got here. I wanted to ask about the illness, but seeing my husband talk so happily, I thought it could wait, and instead, we reminisced about the past. I also had farts about his relationship with his girlfriend. Before I mentioned staying over, I had asked why he hadn't brought his girlfriend to this island, but my husband just gave a short laugh and brushed it off. Not saying anything could mean something sad had happened. I was careful not to rub salt in my husband's wounds by prying too much. From the next day, I explained the situation to my workplace and took some time off. I didn't know how much time was left, but I wanted to spend as much of it as possible with my husband. My husband, who couldn't walk much, was wheeled around, and we visited various places on the island. Places from our previous memories, places we visited for the first time, scenery that I wanted to show him. Even without any conversation, just being together was enough. I wish we had been like this when we were married. I realized that my feelings, even after divorce, were growing stronger. But it's too late for anything now. Telling him would only cause confusion. I'll stay by his side, maintaining a relationship close to friendship. Our blissful days were short-lived as the illness steadily ate away at my husband. He became so weak that we couldn't even go for walks, something we had been looking forward to. Even everyday activities became difficult, and he started dozing off more. The doctor visited every day, but the only consolation was that he wasn't feeling any pain. This was natural. I couldn't believe that I had to part with my husband so soon. I cared for him without ever leaving his side, in case he woke up feeling lonely, never knowing when he'd open his eyes again. Sometimes when he did wake up, he would talk as if he was still dreaming. Other times, he'd speak of distant memories as if they'd just happened. Every moment felt so precious that it deepened my sadness. As time went on, he began to wake up less and less. Even when he couldn't converse anymore, I read his favorite books to him or described nostalgic landscapes, hoping he'd hear me. One day, as I wanted to tell him about a beautiful sunset, I took his hand. That's when I noticed it had grown cold. His breathing became irregular, and only his chest moved in an unnatural rhythm. I hastily called the doctor, who said he'd come right away. Feeling torn apart by the dire situation, I awaited the doctor's arrival. I prayed it was some sort of mistake. I wanted the doctor to say, "He's fine." But when the doctor arrived and examined him, he said, "His blood pressure has dropped significantly. Let's make him comfortable. I think he would want you by his side. I'll step out. Just call if you need me." And with that, he left to give us privacy. So, the time has truly come. I knew it would, but it's still so hard. Meeting you brought me so much happiness. We had our struggles, but deep down, I really loved you. I whispered these words into my husband's ear, holding his hand. Then, I felt a faint squeeze from him in return. Medically, it seemed impossible, but I felt it clearly. Shortly after, he took his last breath and peacefully passed away. I couldn't stop my tears, but I was grateful I could be there for his final moments. After he passed away, things moved quickly leading up to the funeral, and I didn't have much time to grieve. When I finally returned home after sorting out his belongings, I noticed a pile of mail. Going through them, I was stunned to find dozens of letters from him. There were dozens of letters from him inside. Even though I tried my best to stay by his side every day, I wondered when he had found the time. The letters started from the day we were united. It seemed he had moved here hoping to run into me, never truly believing it would happen. I was surprised, but it was difficult to hide my feelings of joy. I couldn't help but smile at his typical humorous way of writing. Knowing he felt that way about me was the greatest comfort. However, as time passed, his handwriting became erratic, and the contents grew shorter, reflecting the progression of his illness. Reading on with sorrow, my eyes paused at a certain spot. That letter contained the truth behind our divorce. He began battling the illness while we were still married. By the time he found out, it was too late, and the treatment he took as his last hope seemed to only have side effects without any benefits. My husband, feeling he didn't want me to live with the burden of his illness, had planned our divorce, and I had unknowingly fallen for it. I had been completely deceived, thinking there was another woman in his life. He went along with that misunderstanding to give me a significant amount of money as alimony. His letter read, "I no longer need treatment, so I settled all our assets to ensure you live comfortably." I thought of all the harsh words I had thrown at him, and felt a deep remorse. "I'm truly sorry, truly sorry." As tears streamed down my face, I heard a knock on the door. Wiping my eyes, I opened it to find the doctor. "Doctor, why?" I asked, and I was handed a single sealed letter. The envelope was the same one that had contained the letter from my husband I was reading earlier. He asked me to mail these every day. Some he wrote in advance, knowing he wouldn't be able to later. It was his last wish. And this is the final letter. He wanted me to give it to you when you came home. So, that's what happened. This was genuinely the last letter from my husband. I thanked the doctor and took a moment alone to face my husband's letter. With a calm heart, I gently opened it to find, faintly written, "Thank you, I love you." It seemed like we were going around in circles, but our hearts were always connected. "I love you too." Saying that, it felt like the smile on my husband's funeral portrait slightly broadened. It's been decades since my husband passed away, and I've continued to live on this island. I've grown used to living on this island. On the day I decided to never leave this island, I built a grave near the house my husband once had. The view he cherished daily, I'm sure he still enjoys it. I plan to someday rest at that place, but now surrounded by memories of my husband, I live my days peacefully and happily. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.